When Nader Shah was killed, the greatness he had brought to Iran disappeared. Kasravi starts his book with this sentence, showing his dissatisfaction with the Qajar era. He says that despite this, Iran was still one of the most notable countries in Asia, and while Karim Khan and his successors did not add much to the country, they also did not take anything away from it. But during the Qajar period, Iran became extremely weak and its status declined. Kasravi says the reasons for this are many, but the most important one was that the world had changed. Countries were advancing, but Iran remained the same as before. During this time, two powerful governments emerged, one in the north and one in the south. Iran, weak and unaware, was caught between them. And Kasravi states, truly for such a time, the timid Qajar kings were not worthy of ruling. But we have read all of this in history books before, so what makes Kasravi's books unique? Why is this worth reading? Kasravi focuses on the small details that are still relevant today. He says that despite the repeated defeats of the Qajar kings, neither the rulers nor the people truly awakened. Kings came and went, and the people continued to live blindly under their rule. Only in the final years of Nasir-ad-Din Shah's reign did the first small signs of awakening appear. This is Kasravi's own sentence. But then he adds, the kings did nothing themselves, and they did not let others do anything either. This means Kasravi criticizes both the kings and the people. He then names individuals who did everything they could to bring about reforms. One of these figures was Haj Mirza Hossein Khan, known as Sepah Salar. Nasir-ad-Din Shah brought him back from Istanbul and made him prime minister. Sepah Salar reorganized the ministers, reformed the royal court, and introduced new government structures based on European models. But his enemies, according to Kasravi, told the clergy that Sepah Salar wanted to turn Iran into a European-style country and had given the railway concession to the British. The clergy called him irreligious, and because, as Kasravi says, the clergy were very powerful at that time, they influenced the king, and in the end, the king had no choice but to remove Sepah Salar from power. Kasravi continues mentioning Mirza Malikum Khan and Sayyid Jamaluddin Asadabadi, praising their efforts, but he believes that the betrayal of the king and Russian influence prevented their reforms from succeeding. Kasravi identifies the first true awakening of the people as the moment when foreign concessions were granted. One of the most important concessions was the tobacco concession. Before this, Kasravi says, the people did not react strongly to foreign influence, but when this concession opened the door for foreigners to enter Iran and Europeans became more visible in the country, the people, especially the clergy, became frustrated and started to protest. The first protest started in Tabriz, where people tore down the company's posters. Then the movement spread to Isfahan and Tehran. Finally, with a fatwa from the clergy, all tobacco shops were shut down, surprising foreign observers. Then Kasravi writes about the role of schools and newspapers. He says that in the beginning, newspapers in Iran were established by the government, and the first ones were official state-run publications. But among independent newspapers, he mentions Akhtar, which he believes made a significant contribution to raising public awareness. The first modern schools were founded by Haj Mirza Hassan Rushdie, and Kasravi acknowledges Amin-ud-Dawla for helping these schools grow. But then Amin-ul-Sultan returned to power, and at that time, the king was severely short on money. So they decided to take a loan from the British. When the British delayed their response, Amin-ul-Sultan turned to the Russians, who agreed, but in return, they took control of Iran's northern customs revenues. The king and Amin-ul-Sultan went on a trip to Europe, spent lavishly, and returned to Iran empty-handed. This frustrated the people even more. But worse than that, Amin-ul-Sultan actively blocked the expansion of schools. During this period, many underground pamphlets were written criticizing Amin-ul-Sultan for taking loans from Russia. But none of this had any effect on Amin-ul-Sultan, and he continued his lavish travels. One of the things that enraged the people the most was rumors. For example, it was said that the king had ordered soil from Europe for his greenhouse. Another issue that made people angry was Joseph Naus, an official from Belgium, being put in charge of Iran's customs. And when he was promoted to the head of all customs affairs, it caused even more discontent among the clergy and merchants. Kasravi says there were two groups controlling Iran at that time, the kings and those close to the king who had direct influence over him, the clergy who had the power to mobilize the people. Aminu Sultan had enemies in both groups. Eventually he was dismissed and Ain-ud-Dawla became the new prime minister. People initially viewed Ain-ud-Dawla positively, but then a shocking event happened in Tehran. At that time, there were large religious schools across Iran. Students would go to the houses of prominent clergies and sometimes gather around them to receive lessons and financial support. Then a conflict broke out between students of two seminaries, Madrasa Muhammadiyya and Madrasa Sadr. But why this happened? Because Muhammadiyya was giving out more financial aid. Ain-ud-Dawla ordered the arrest of students. To show his authority to the people, he arrested 14 of them, put them in chains, and exiled them to Ardabil. Such treatment of religious students had never ever seen before in Iran. Kasravi argues that beyond foreign concessions and political corruption, the true forces behind Iran's awakening were the expansion of schools, the rise of independent newspapers, the growing awareness of the people. He says the first push toward legal reform began with Sepah Salar, then the tobacco protest became the first major popular uprising. As a conclusion, Iran's awakening did not happen overnight. Repeated defeats, unfair concessions, foreign influence, and oppressive rulers gradually pushed the people toward action. But what truly transferred this awakening into a movement was knowledge, spread through schools, newspapers, and past struggles. This chapter reminds us that true change always starts with awareness. Just as Iranians of that time awakened, today too, real progress is only possible when we learn from history and apply its lessons. I'm summarizing the entire book chapter by chapter here. If you like this video, like, comment, and follow my page. Thanks for watching. Take care.